entitlement case study of a 156 unit mid-rise in Salt Lake City, Utah. And with that, that's all I know. So I will hand it over to Gil.
Sounds great. All right, so a little background about how we got this deal. So this talks about the importance of networking, staying in touch with good players, people who are doing active deals, leveraging relationships with a lot of wholesalers and staying in communication. So this was brought to me by a local wholesaler based in Utah. He came to us with this piece of land, 11 North, 800 West. He said, hey, we have this opportunity. It is in a TSA zone, which is a transit station area. A TSA zoning basically is geared towards like high density as well as reliance on nearby transportation. So we looked into the site. I said, we'll take a look at it. And we started, basically what I want to do here is I put a bunch of stars on things that highlight the area to see what is the highest and best use for this site. The wholesaler also kind of gave us pre-development plans. He was like, hey, this is kind of sketch that we're seeing here. This is what we think you can build. And what's actually funny is actually started as only the bottom half, which was 2 parcels. It's 11 North and also 17 North. And then over time, through more negotiation, working with the wholesaler, we were able to acquire the upright corner, which is 19, and as well as the duplex to the left. And basically, so what happened here is we started looking into the area. We're trying to see what's happened. On the bottom, you see the star that we have a nice trail station. To the left, we had Red Iguana 2, which is a very popular taco shop, one of the hottest Mexican food in Salt Lake City. Adjacent to the site, we have just a little next to the site itself. What you'll see there, that was another 40 unit development that was already currently in play. It was all studios and 1 beds. The site on the north side, again, just a little bit higher, that was another site that went for sale, which also had plans for another like 120 unit development. To the far right, we had the Bodie Apartments, just a little bit forward. Yep, we had the Bodie Apartments, which is an 80 unit affordable housing development as well. Then obviously a little further, you have the I-15, so direct access to the highway. All the way on North Temple Road, we had the Jackson Lucid Lightning Rail Station. That is the one of 4 major lightning rails in Salt Lake City. If you take that, you can get anywhere from Ogden all the way down to Provo. It is one of the best. People compare that trail station to, the New York subway station. It is so efficient. It's so fast. It's so clean. Utah has been working on fighting for more housing, and trying to get people to take the public transportation a lot more, so people love taking that. If you look a little north, it's right next to the O'Reillys. So that was another mixed use development that was coming to play. That was about a 50 unit. And then when you look at 900 West North Temple, that empty lot, that was another 140 unit mid-rise that was coming. And this is what you're seeing here is all in a literally 1 block radius. This does not take into account the other 120 unit that's on the other corner. There's also 644 City Station, which is just on the other side of the I-15, as well as other large developments in here. So when we're seeing this, we're seeing obviously a lot of development. We're seeing a lot of new buildings coming here. And I know a very popular question someone may ask, like, is this going to lead to oversaturation? And the simple answer is no, because we looked extensively into Utah's master plan, which is usually every city, as you guys probably do or don't know, they have a 30-year master plan, which tells you what do they want the city to look like in the next 30 years. And they have statistically found out a lot of people have been loving coming to Utah because the lower corporate tax rate, the cost of living is significantly lower. You have the city life, you have the nature. There's so many positives, and a lot of people keep moving into Utah, and they are behind over 10,000 units currently. So they are trying to fit as many possible, get as many units in here as they can. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. Again, this is kind of just digging in a little bit more into the neighborhood. What are we seeing here? Is this the right niche? We're trying to figure out, is this really the highest and best use for this land? Can we take on more units here? And again, what we're seeing is there's a lot of development. It's right next to the train station. It's very close. It's about a 7-minute drive from the heart of downtown Salt Lake. Again, it's also close to about a 10-minute drive from the airport. It's also about another like 10-15-minute drive from the Vivian Arena, which is where the Utah Jazz play. It's very close also to the Mormon Church. There is a lot of just hot things in this immediate area, right?
So
So
Will, before we move on, I just had a question just to clarify. Is this did you entitle this project, or did you entitle it and then develop it?
we just entitled it. So we actually,
Okay.
the plan was to build, but then when I'll touch on it more towards the end,
Okay.
when we were talking about structuring, essentially, it just didn't pay out for us as investors to stay into the deal. So we ended up selling it to a private equity group. Yeah. So go ahead and jump to the next slide. And again, this is more stuff that we're just seeing in the nearby area, how much development is happening. We're seeing, again, they're trying to fight for housing for the people. So again, more reasons why we really liked it. And we're trying to think, is this going to be a problem for the city? And during this time too, we already started bidding out the projects with other local architects and civil engineers and trying to figure out what is the way to maximize this piece of land and seeing who also has the best relationships with the city. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. Then digging into the zoning and the process for this site. Something awesome about the TSA zoning. This area is not only TSA, it also is by right to build, which basically means there is a fast track permitting process in this zone. Basically, as long as you check off there's basically what it requires an administrative review basis by the city using a point system. And as long as you hit 125 points, you get permits. It's one of the greatest things. It's so much more efficient. Not every city has this, of course, but this is something that, again, Utah has been fighting because they want to create more housing. So as long as you hit the points, you're good. And the way you earn points is by creating green building, high density, low parking, accessibility, creating like community and street amenities, right? Even just adding a bench outside in front, you get you a couple points. We worked with, again, we hired one of the best architects in the area who knew the area very well. He was able to end up getting us 175 points, which kind of gets to show you how easy it is. I mean, it definitely was work, but how easy it is to achieve the highest and best for the site. And then once you get that going, it's very, very easy process. We're gonna have the architect in every single meeting with the city. We had a pre-submittal conference where essentially we're sitting down with the city, talking to them, hey, this is what we're planning on building. This is how many units. This is the unit mix. These are the ideal types of tenants. This is what we're expecting on making things of that sort and kind of align that interest with the city. They would then at that point, right, tell, okay, you should do this, take that out, add this, right? Another thing actually about the site, it was kind of hard to see, but there was actually a electrical power line that was actually going between the 4 lots. So that was another thing that we had to talk to the city about, like, all right, we have to turn that off and relocate it so it doesn't affect the other buildings nearby. So that's another thing that required a permit. But again, having such a good architect and having the right people on our team, we had a really good construction manager as well as a project manager who handled that at ease. They had also a lot of relationships with the city so they can easily drive down, get the proper paperwork signed out, and go from there. And yeah, I mean, at this point, I'll kind of touch in a little bit about the process. You can go ahead to the next slide. So this is kind of where we realized, all right, we're in a great zone. There is immense amount of development. We know that the city wants to see this. It's going to be easier, I'm not going to say easy, but easier than other locations. We were like, let's get the right team. So we've, myself, and we basically found 3 other strong partners, all who had the right skills. One was leading the project. I was managing all the finances. leveraging relationships with the private equity groups, real estate funds, debt funds, making sure we have all the most accurate numbers to date. We also had the project manager, which again, he was managing all like the nitty gritty details when it comes to working with the city, working with architect, working with civil, getting the phase one, getting the geotechnicals, figuring out, because two of the sites had industrial warehouses on them. So getting the process of actually being able to demo and grade the site. And once he did that himself, that's when we had our construction manager. He has his own construction company. He came in and actually was able to demo all the land at cost, because he is part of the team. And as return, we kind of gave it to him as equity. So in this point, this is where we're having a lot more of, I would say, like the fun. We realized we have a great opportunity. We raised the capital, we closed on the land. I'll dig into the numbers a little bit more to kind of let you all know what that looks like. But this is now when we then once we close on the land, we get to work with the architect and actually design the building. So as we can go to the next like 2 slides, so we'll look at the next one. This is kind of like the general idea of like, what is the building going to look like? This is kind of just going to give you what the block view is. And then we go to the following slide. This is when we sat down in weekly meetings with the architects. We're talking through, what do we want the building to look like? What do we want to see? So we added, a full gym, sauna, steam room. We're adding like different types of amenities. So we have like this like little, so it's kind of hard to see in this shape, but it actually is kind of more of a U shape, and the middle is more open, which actually faces the sun. And so it gets like direct light in the middle. So we added like barbecues. We added a little movie theater that can be projected on the wall. So it can create this sense of like of a community as well, having movie nights, things like that, just to make it more fun. At this point, we're just kind of having fun with it. And as long as we're doing, again, checking off the boxes, you have no issues with getting the permitting.
So Gil, let me ask you a couple of
Yeah.
questions here. Number one, how from a time frame standpoint, how long does an entitlement project typically take, right? And I know there's a lot of variables depending on location and what you're doing, but ballpark or average
I would say
range.
between like 12 to 18 months, 20 months, really depends. I mean, I'm in California, Los Angeles, forget about it. It's minimum of 2 years. It's pretty crazy out here. But this one in particular ended up taking us just under 11 months because it's in the fast track.
Okay. And then so you're dealing with architects and you're working with them and you're building, right? You said, hey, we can be a little creative, and now we're doing saunas and we're doing these cookout areas and all of this. And so my question is, as you're developing this vision, right, of this development project, but you're not actually developing it. I know you were intending to originally, but as the entitled project moves or gets sold to a developer, how much, if any, wiggle room do they have, right? Are they looking at the project and they have to buy into your plans, right? Your architect plans and everything 100%, or can they go back to the city, or do they typically say, hey, thanks for doing the work, we're going to go build exactly this?
So it depends how deep your relationships go. My background was in the acquisition disposition of like single tenant, multi-tenant net lease assets, where I was working predominantly with a lot of like professional and institutional clients. So I already had a lot of private equity firms, real estate funds who were already looking for these types of projects. And for those reasons, I called them beforehand, because our plan was to build. So we had them in the meetings, and they would also give, their highest input. Also, they're bringing us the best property manager. They're trying to figure out what is literally the best function for this building, and how can we maximize the return, how can we maximize our income, and also lower our construction costs as well. So for me per se, it works out well because I have those relationships and I can bring it into the meetings, but not everyone does have it. So sometimes people do just entitle it and sell it, but that with that comes more risk, right? by not having them in that early stage, you're kind of selling this already permit ready. And if you don't have the experience and you don't know what the city wants, you're opening yourself to unnecessary risk and might have to sell your lot at a not as high of a premium.
Gotcha. Okay,
Well,
thank you. So back
I'll
to,
add
and
on.
I'm a firm believer, everything is based on relationships and network. Like
Yes.
that's the foundation of everything amazing that happens. So thank you for that. That was just a shameless plug on relationships.
Exactly.
Networking is crucial.
And I'll
Yeah.
add to that just on a general note. I mean, to your point, Angie, whoever buys the project doesn't have to follow like the plans that you have at all. Like they're free to go
Correct.
back to the city and do whatever they want with the land because they own it. It's just that if you're going to sell them the land at a high premium, like Gil said, 2 or 3 times what the land itself is worth, somebody's probably not going to pay that high of a price unless the plans are good. And so with that, you have to know who your buyer is and what they want, because if you design a project that nobody wants to buy and build, or that's going to be too much of a headache for anyone to build, or is going to cost too much for anyone to build, like Gil said, you're probably going to have to sell for a lot cheaper. So you really have to take all those things into consideration, very similar to like flipping a house or something, right? It's like, I mean, if you flip a house, but you do a really bad job, you put in really dated fixtures or things that nobody wants to see. I mean, somebody will probably buy it, but they may not buy it for the price that you want. So you always have to be designing with your end buyer in mind. What do people want to see now? What is a builder going to want to see? What is a buyer going to want to see? A private equity partner? What is their criteria? And that's where having that experience and those connections really benefits you. You can tailor the project to that end buyer, and then that de-risks your project a lot. That way you're not just like kind of shooting in the dark and saying, well, I'll just like throw something on here and we'll see if it sticks. You're saying like, no, I've designed this project specifically to appeal to this buyer, and I know there's a half a dozen of them that I could call that would buy this project if I do it this way.
Yeah, it's always best to start with the buyer in mind,
Yep.
right?
And I will add that we did during the entitlement phase, I was calling every firm that I had a relationship with and having them look at it, asking them questions. We built 2 models, the entitlement model and the development model. We're sharing numbers, talking in the PE shops. So we're already getting a lot of ideas on how to design the building, because people are already saying, oh, we want to see this, so then we go back to the architect. I said, hey, we want to see this. What would that look like? How much more would that cost? And then again, running back and forth. It's a lot of fun, I will say. Before jumping to the numbers too, I actually also was one thing I forgot to mention. We can go to that next slide. It's not that big of a deal. I wanted to say too, another thing why we love the site and why it was so great. It was also in a opportunity zone. For those who are aware or not aware of what that is, it's basically as defined, an economic development tool that allows people to invest in distressed areas in the United States. The purpose is to spur economic growth and job creation in low-income communities while providing tax benefits to investors. And if that makes basically what that says, that is the best thing in the world for these private equity firms and real estate funds, because they have so much capital gains. It's a great way for them to roll all their funds into this project, build it, hold it, and just write off everything. So this opened a lot of people's eyes and made it more attractive to investors and other buyers. All right, so now kind of digging into the numbers a little bit. So talking to the wholesaler, we basically were able to acquire the land for $984,000 with closing costs. This came out to approximately $8,000 a door, as well as $40 a foot. Market at the time was being sold at $13,000 a door and $65 a foot. So we already, another pro why we liked it is we had it below market. God forbid something were to happen to the site, we were unable to entitle it. We know we could set at least for market value, get our investors' money back, and move on to the next project. Next thing, we had a great relationship with the architect as well, where they only required a $100,000 deposit. They didn't require us to come up with like the full funds. Surveys and studies was another $5,900. The seller already had a couple surveys already previously done. So the only thing that we had to get done was the phase 1 as well as the geotechnical studies. And then the rest is just kind of like basic covering legal when you're setting up the structure, negotiating contracts with the private equity groups, and company expenses for like travel, food, or whatever it may be. So our all-in cost, including for land, soft costs, as well as our carrying cost, is about 1.15 million. At the same time, we were also talking to a bunch of brokers, and Utah is an interesting state where they don't like to really disclose a lot of the numbers. So you really have to know people who will tell you, hey, this is what land is selling for and what you can buy and sell for. We had a couple people on our team had really good relationships with some of the appraisers as well as the brokers. So they're able to tell us where market is. That's how we found out, again, we were below market, as well as selling it for RTI ready. We could see, if you guys look at the sale metrics in the upper right, where the low end you can get is around 22,000 and as high as like 27, but actually it's more close, you can go as 30,000. Really just depends on the build, unit mix, all that kind of stuff. We always like to be conservative as well. We don't want to, shoot for the stars and, end up, a couple miles away, right? We want to have a really good return. So we always hit target, and a low end is kind of what we anticipate. And through negotiations, essentially, we had two, at the end, it came down to two funds. One had a fund with a large REIT that allocated them $100 million QOZ fund. They were ready to jump in. And they were also have a in-house developer, so a construction company that could handle the build. They can sign on the debt. They can bring all the capital, right? And then we had another fund that said that they would just bring the entire capital. Through negotiations and figuring out what was the best for us, we ended up starting going with the larger PE shop, just because when we were looking at what our equity stake would look like at the end, it would have been more of like a passive deal, which is not a bad thing. But our overall return, if we were able just to sell it fully entitled at, almost a 3x multiple, it was a lot more attractive to us. So what we ended up doing is we sent them to the private equity group, we negotiated a contract, and we were able to sell for the $27,470 a door. They were able to cover, as at this point too, if God mentioned, we had, at this point we had it to pay for, because what happened with the architect is we had $100,000 in cost, but then when we were working on bringing the P shop and we saw that we were already kind of working on getting the debt financing and all that, he wanted to start getting payments as well. We were actually able to have the buyer pay for the architectural and engineering, paying for the selling costs, as well as the additional carrying and interest reserves for the last few months. So that was a lot of stuff that kind of saved us at the end, and then we were able to sell for an end profit about another 1.5. And this whole thing took about, again, just about 11 months. It was pretty straightforward. Every week as we're moving forward, again, the architect was just sitting with the city, sitting with us. Every week we're going back and forth. There was not one time we're skipping any steps. So it really helped accelerate the process and mitigate a lot of the risk.
That's not too shabby of a profit for 11 months of work. So congrats.
Thank you.
That's a huge win.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last slide, again, this is just.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened here. Hold on.
Oh.
I don't know.
Is there a way?
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me see. I don't know. I saw it, but now it's missing. So hold on one second. I'm going to stop share and see if I can find it, because wasn't it the risk mitigation?
Yeah, exactly. It's just how to mitigate risk.
That's important. Let me see. Hold on one second. Oh, here we go. Okay, so let me see. It's so weird. So I'm gonna just get out of full screen and then we'll be able to see it. So
okay.
Hold on a second. All right. You should be able to see it now.
There it is.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So then lastly, just how we mitigated title risk throughout the entire process. These are the 5 main key points that we noticed. So basically, again, understanding the municipality of the future land use, kind of you and Andrew were talking about that before. What is the long-term plan for the city? What do they want a city growing, right? Looking nearby, saying what other buildings are going up, and making sure that we find the highest and best use for the land. Right. So it's a silly example, but you're not going to put a 99-cent store in Beverly Hills, right? You want to find what meets what's the best thing for the land. Again, next thing is understanding the neighborhood. We want to find out what's the feel, what's the culture. Me in California, as an investor, I flew out to Utah multiple times, and I also had other partners who had boots on the ground in Salt Lake City. So we're driving the sites, we're seeing the people, we're walking into other apartment complexes, we're asking questions about what do you want to see, what do you like, just what do they do, what is their typical day, who is the demographic, what is looking up the average income. Just things of all those types of metrics are super important so we can find out like what's the best thing. We found out too, there's a lot of people who are very active in that area. So we added a full kind of like sports club gym where we have like the best equipment, again the sauna, pool. There we talks about putting on the roof was a like not an Olympic pool, but it's like a electric pool that you can go in that powers and swims so you can get your strokes in. Just things like that, again just adding more things so it'd be more attractive in the long run for the builder. Again, common one also like political risk, what projects, finding out what have not been approved, what have been approved. Again, having good relationships with people in the city, as well as having a great architect and civil engineer who has done projects before in that area is super crucial. And they'll be able to tell you, what we got to see. Also, again, which kind of leads to the next point, which is leveraging your civil engineer and other third parties, having the right players. I can't stress it enough. Having the right people there from the beginning who know what they're doing is going to be such a key point in mitigating your risk. And lastly, just buy below market and confirm your numbers. And it's a very common thing in real estate. You make your money when you buy. Because you never know what's going to happen. I have done thousands of models, and I can tell you right now, none of them have ever projected to be correctly. It's a fun joke I like to make, but it's because every number changes so frequently, you never really know. But that's why you need someone who's very active and constantly monitoring the numbers so you can see what's going to happen. And you're going to constantly update so you know what to change. Because there were instances where we had to, pay for, because we had an original design, which was for the first two parcels, and then we got the third and the fourth. That costs money for the architect. Change orders are very expensive. So you want to make sure by having a low basis and always constantly updating your numbers, you can prevent yourself from having any additional risk. And yeah, and again, make sure you get multiple bids. You want to make sure you're getting the best costs and never overpay for the deal. And as long as you do that, you'll do okay.
Awesome. Thank you for walking us through that. That was really helpful.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, let's see. And then what I will do is I will stop recording in a minute. And then we can answer any questions that we have. But I will say before I do that, so the goal, right, is to bring everyone as, part of the Ohana Investment Partner Club to bring opportunities to you. So obviously we just reviewed a case study and something that was in the past, but we wanted to bring you the information on entitlements. We want you to understand what those numbers look like. And to me, those numbers look amazing within 11 months, right? And I know it's not always 11 months, that was fast tracked, but that's amazing. So we want to make sure that you are getting the information and you are getting the opportunities that you desire and quite frankly, you deserve. So if you would like to get access to opportunities or offerings similar to this one, again, this was a past one, but please do sign up at ohanainvestmentpartners.com/invest, and then you will have access to these, to opportunities like these, I should say. So with that being said, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll go through Q&A if anyone has. So bear with me 1 second, and thank you. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.